Though we speak frequently during the course of a day, a formal speech requires extra attention to detail in preparation of a more formal speech presentation. What can one do in advance to prepare for a speech? The challenge is partly determined by the speaker's experience, background and sometimes cultural influence and existing habits of speaking, pitch, pace and volume. Each depends on long-term practice for success. Adjusting your pace is important. There is nothing worse than a collector talking at such a speed that the customer doesn't understand what you are saying. Remember to adjust your speed to the person you are speaking to. If you are speaking in English and the first language of the person you are talking to is not, you should speak as slowly as you can. It is also important to be aware of the pitch of your voice. The higher it is, the more that will be confused with nervousness, and the less successful you will be. When talking to convey energy and to be persuasive, you should use pitch inflection to make what you are saying come to life. This might come as a shock. My advice is the lower the volume the better. I am sure you have heard that the louder you shout, the better the results. In all my years in credit, I have never found shouting a good way to collect. Shouting is usually associated with a loss of control. The point is you need to stay in control at all times. The appropriate volume is when you can be heard and understood.
Joint cracking is the act of moving one's joints in a certain way, causing a popping or cracking sound. It is a habit shared by many, a way that allows people to release anxiety and tension. This popping noise is caused by air bubbles forming in the spaces between the joints, occurring where there is a layer of fluid at the joints separating the bones. Yet, cracking joints is a commonly misunderstood phenomenon, one stemming from an old myth many hear in their youth. Popping knuckles will cause arthritis. From a young age, children are prevented from cracking their knuckles, and are implanted the idea that those who pop their knuckles would have arthritis to look forward to in their future. This old wives' tale has since been proven false, for there is no evidence that cracking of one's joints causes arthritis. Scientific studies found no proof that knuckle cracking caused arthritis.
Generally, when someone is labeled as overqualified, it means they have a more extensive and more impressive resume than the hiring manager expected. Regardless of their ability and willingness to do the job, they frequently are screened out by HR and the hiring manager never sees the resume. Some managers are reluctant to hire overqualified workers for many reasons. If the company posts the salary, or salary range, for a position, it is appropriate to assume that anyone who applies for the position is willing to do the work for that salary. Yes, a more experienced worker may ask for a higher salary, because they know how much more they can contribute, but if that's the best salary you can offer, they will do the job for that salary and do it well. Many managers, especially new ones, worry that if they hire someone more experienced, that person will want to do things their own way rather than the way the manager wants. It is a question you need to get an answer from the candidate for, but that should be during the interview process, not used as a screening tool. If they want to do things their way, dump them and move on to the next candidate. An overqualified worker probably has better skills because they have broader skills, both technically and interpersonally. You can teach them any new techniques, they need to do the job, and you can take advantage of their greater ability to multitask and to get more done, because of their ability to work across functional boundaries.
First impressions are many times lasting impressions. As teachers, it is imperative to make the most appropriate impression with the students at the beginning of every school year. Though first impressions always evolve, it is crucial to create a lasting image that helps the teacher to build positive and productive relationships. The first thing that a student notices is the physical appearance of the teacher. So, the outfit needs to be according to the school dress code, clean and ironed. Teachers should also make sure that the hair, nails and teeth are clean. Appearances surely count in making a good first impression. Teachers should themselves set the example of cleanliness and neatness, as these two characteristics are so highly expected on the student's part. The teacher must be punctual and also be prepared for the class. She must have her own markers and other teaching tools. Introducing oneself and getting to know the students is very important during the first contact, as it sets the ground to build relationships. There should also be the right balance between the serious and humorous tone, to give the students the opportunity to approach the teacher in a respectful manner.
When taking a quiz on Facebook leads to an unknown analytics firm gathering information on you, your friends and your family, the uncomfortable truth starts to settle in. There's almost nothing you can do online without digital eyes following you. Trackers have long been widespread across the internet, with advertisers and social networks collecting as much information on you as possible. Even when you create an account with almost no personal details on it, it doesn't take long for a company to relearn everything about you. The UK data analytics firm gathered data on 87 million people without their permission, using an innocent-looking personality prediction quiz. That information included access to a person's profile, location and likes, as well as data on friends linked to the account. Other privacy mistakes throughout the year continued to grow people's concerns. Reports found, for instance, that Google's services tracked and stored people's location data, even if location history was disabled, while lawmakers learned that wireless carriers were selling real-time location data from your phones to tracking companies. People deserve to feel comfortable that all entities that use personal information will be held accountable for protecting it. And we believe that regulation can support a dynamic marketplace for businesses of all types and sizes. Our own information, from the everyday to the deeply personal, is being weaponized against us every day. We shouldn't sugarcoat the consequences. This is surveillance. This should make us very uncomfortable. It should unsettle us.
Future springs might arrive earlier than expected. Scientists in the United Kingdom have published a study charting the relationship between light pollution and the timing when trees produce buds. By observing 4 tree species, they found that on average, artificial light may cause trees to bud more than 7 days earlier than their naturally occurring counterparts. Light pollution occurs when streetlights and other artificial light sources brighten up the night sky, disrupting ecosystems and obscuring stars. In fact, 99% of people living in the United States and Europe can't see the Milky Way because of light pollution. Light pollution contributes to climate change too, by adding excess heat into the air. The study showed that European ash trees tend to bud about 5 days earlier in brighter areas compared with darker areas. Other trees tested, including European sycamores, European beech trees, and pedunculate oaks, burst about 7.5 days earlier in brighter conditions. Smaller plants growing directly under streetlights could be more heavily affected. The team also included air temperature data in the UK, hypothesizing that the temperature of the air would correlate with bud burst timing. But they were able to isolate light as a specific contributing factor. Light pollution will cause trees to grow in the direction artificial light is shining on them, allowing leaves closer to the light source to take on more chlorophyll and thus develop a lighter green color.
Diversity in national, ethnic, religious, and linguistic backgrounds of people has resulted in mixed cultures, nations, and languages. All of these elements are important to people. Billions of people in our world speak thousands of languages. People from different parts of the world have a different understanding of the world. An Asian will have different thoughts about life than a South American, for instance. The two perceive the world differently than each other. Culture and languages have an influence on the way people think, whereas perception does not. It is said that perception of a person is less important than a person's language when he is acquiring knowledge. Subject in a sentence is indispensable for Europeans, but some people do not need a subject to understand the meaning of a sentence, as they view the world differently than the others. Say, a friend makes you close your eyes and gives you an object and wants you to tell what the object is. However, he does not allow you to use your senses other than touch. You cannot really recognize the object, can you? You will immediately identify the object when your friend says, "It is an apple," let's say. Again, language is superior to perception. People who are speaking different languages have a different outlook on word usage. Their language influences their worldview. Much of the world admits the superiority of language on perception in the acquisition of knowledge.
Groups tend to perform better with a combination of willing followers and strong leaders, which in most animal species are bolder, more extroverted individuals. But incentives, like higher salaries for humans, can cause natural followers to become leaders, and scientists have long debated the desirability of such role reversal. To probe whether natural followers can be turned into leaders and vice versa, a research team studied stickleback fish, a group foraging species known to have bold and shy individuals. First, they studied the fish in large laboratory tanks for several weeks to separate the leaders from the followers. In one experiment, the fish were rewarded with food for displaying their natural behavior, the leader for initiating a trip and the follower for trailing behind. In a second, they were rewarded for role reversal, the shy fish for each time it initiated a foraging trip and the bolder one for following. The prediction was that bold individuals would perform poorly when forced to adopt the role of follower, considering that they are less responsive to other individuals' behavior. The opposite turned out to be true. Leader fish were much quicker to adopt a follower role than the other way round. The team said their findings raised intriguing questions for the broader study of group behavior. Strong positive effects of personality variation are only likely to emerge when members of a group are free to establish their own roles.
Recession is good for the economy, because during a recession, healthy companies are rewarded for their method of operating. Companies that were operating unhealthily and relied on risky practices will now have to cut back on their expenses and become healthy in order to survive. By doing so, competition becomes fair again, and this will benefit the companies who are already operating responsibly. These companies can now invest in new technologies and expand their operations, because this has become cheaper. Strong companies can now take over companies, which were taking risks, at a much lower price as before. In this way, some employees at the risky companies are able to continue to work at a more secure company. Healthy companies will also benefit from the fact that prices will drop. For example, advertising costs will drop, because unhealthy companies have to cut back on their spending. Therefore, healthy companies will grow even further, and will be able to offer more secure jobs for the unemployed. Drug marketing is a big business, and companies are willing to spend a lot of money to offer you an easy solution to a health problem you may or may not have. From 2012 to 2015, yearly spending on prescription drug advertising in all media outlets, except digital, rose from $3.2 billion to $5.2 billion, and that figure is expected to only go up. Many medical advocacy groups say that drug companies employ direct-to-consumer advertising in a way that puts consumers at a disadvantage. Companies don't have to spell out exactly how the drug works, mention the cost, or note if there is a generic drug in the same class or a similar drug with fewer risks. The way these advertisements are presented is also misleading. Everyone on the ads appears healthy, happy, dancing, and they get better. So, people are led to believe that the drug will be effective, which is often not the case, and that they should replace their old therapy with the newer one because it's better. And if they give you any numbers at all, they're almost always the deceptive relative numbers that look really good, not the more realistic absolute numbers. So the benefits are over-exaggerated, the harms are downplayed or missed, and that's how patients can get hurt.
Saturn has been known since prehistoric times because it is easily visible to the naked eye. Not until the invention of the telescope, however, did people observe Saturn's magnificent rings. Saturn's rings are thought to be pieces of comets, asteroids or shattered moons that broke up before they reached the planet, torn apart by Saturn's powerful gravity. They are made of billions of small chunks of ice and rock coated with another material such as dust. The ring particles mostly range from tiny, dust-sized icy grains to chunks as big as a house. A few particles are as large as mountains. The rings would look mostly white if you looked at them from the cloud tops of Saturn, and interestingly, each ring orbits at a different speed around the planet. Galileo Galilei was the first to observe Saturn with a telescope in 1610. Because of the crudeness of his telescope, he couldn't determine what the rings were. He incorrectly guessed that there were two large moons on either side of Saturn. He concluded that the rings were arms of some sort. Later in 1676, Giovanni Cassini discovered two Saturn moons. He observed two more Saturn moons in 1685. It would be over 100 years until the next Saturn moon would be discovered.
A significant amount of documents describe the severe impact tobacco advertising makes to embolden non-smokers to begin smoking. Advertising is especially effective among young people. The number of smokers can be considerably reduced if a ban on tobacco advertisement is put into action, along with a similar ban on manifold promotion activities, prohibiting the display of brand details on the cigarette package, promotion at sponsorship events, distribution of merchandise products, as well as any public print, TV, cinema or radio advertisement will also help. A study included in the latest report of the World Bank estimates that tobacco consumption can be reduced by 6% if a coherent advertising ban is joined by a public information campaign on the health effects of smoking. So banning tobacco advertisement is necessary, though the tobacco industry will continue to work out ways to promote their product, and by this influence the consumers, convincing them only of the positive effect a certain brand has on the personal image, rather than stating the risks of the dangerous habit of smoking.
Antarctica is known to be the most southern continent on Earth, located in the Antarctic region. It is located in the south region of the Antarctic Circle. Geographically, it contains the South Pole and is enclosed by the Southern Ocean. On the other hand, Arctic contrasts Antarctica since it is situated on the farthest north region of the Earth. The name Arctic originates from the word Arctos, which is a Greek word that means bear. The name originates from Ursa Major and Ursa Minor constellations that represent the Great and Little Bear respectively. They are seen in the northern hemisphere where they point the North Star, hence the name Arctic. Antarctica means no bears are all mythical. It is true that there are no bears in Antarctica, but the name comes from a Roman version of the Greek word anti, which is commonly a synonym for the opposite in English as well as in Greek. Thus, Antarctica means opposite of Arctic land. The Arctic is considered to be bare with no trees, but includes organisms such as shrubs, moss, and lichen that grow on the ground. The ground is permanently frozen under the topsoil. Apart from the plants growing in the Arctic region, some animals survive in the Arctic, including lemmings, wolverines, and polar bears, just to mention a few. Antarctica is characterized as the driest, coldest, and windiest continent. Organisms that adapt to the weather conditions of Antarctica include algae, fungi, bacteria, while animals that inhabit the region include penguins, seals,
Beck developed a cognitive explanation for mental disorders, but focused it on depression. He believed that individuals who are depressed feel as they do due to their thinking being biased towards negative interpretations of the world and lacking a perceived sense of control. Beck then identified a negative triad, which was a cognitive approach of understanding depression, focusing on how negative schemas about themselves, for example, I can't succeed at anything, the world, for example, I must be successful to be a good person, and the future, for example, nothing will ever change, lead to depression. Beck then claimed that negative schemas may be acquired in an individual's childhood due to a traumatic event. Experiences that might contribute to negative schemas include parental rejection, bullying at school, and the death of a sibling. People with negative schemas become prone to making logical errors in their thinking, and they usually focus selectively on certain points within a situation going on while ignoring the relevant information.
The world we live in is complex. Understanding the requirement of wellness and the factors that influence this state, whether as an individual, community, or nation, helps us to work together to improve the quality of our lifestyles. Well-being is the experience of health, happiness, and prosperity. It includes having good mental health, high life satisfaction, a sense of meaning or purpose, and ability to manage stress. People try to maintain their well-being by pursuing various activities, and many of those are quite effective too. Music is one of the activities that people frequently use to refresh themselves. Research suggests that music can stimulate the body's natural feel-good chemicals, for example, endorphins, oxytocin. It can help energize our mood and provide an outlet for us to take control of our feelings. Listening to music is a popular way to cope with difficult times. For example, it can sometimes express how we are feeling or vent difficult thoughts and emotions for us. You may be able to relate to the music and find comfort from the words in a song. Actively and intentionally selecting and using your music can be a really helpful way to feel more in control of your feelings. Since 1971, Bhutan has rejected GDP as the only way to measure progress. In its place, it has championed a new approach to development, which measures prosperity through principles of gross national happiness, GNH, and the spiritual, physical, social and environmental health of its citizens and natural environment. Children in Bhutan are taught basic agricultural techniques and environmental protection alongside maths and science. A new national waste management program ensures that every piece of material used at the school is recycled. The infusion of GNH into education has also meant daily meditation sessions and soothing traditional music, replacing the clang of the school bell. For the past 3 decades, this belief that well-being should take preference over material growth has remained a global oddity. Now, in a world beset by collapsing financial systems and wide-scale environmental destruction, this tiny Buddhist state's approach is attracting a lot of interest. Bhutan's stark warning that the rest of the world is on an environmental and economical suicide path is starting to gain traction. Last year, the UN adopted Bhutan's call for a holistic approach to development, a move endorsed by 68 countries. A UN panel is now considering ways that Bhutan's GNH model can be replicated across the globe.
Markets constantly change, they are not static but evolve, expand and contract in response to marketing effort, economic conditions and other cultural influences. Markets and market behavior are part of a country's culture. One cannot truly understand how markets evolve or how they react to a marketer's effort without appreciating that marketers are a result of culture. Markets are the result of the three-way interaction of marketers' effort, economic conditions, and other elements of the culture. Marketers are constantly adjusting their efforts to cultural demands of the market. But they also are acting as agents of change whenever the product or idea being marketed is innovative. Whatever the degree of acceptance at whatever level of culture, the use of something new is the beginning of cultural change. And here the marketer becomes the change agent.
Turner is perhaps the best-loved English Romantic artist. He became known as the painter of light, because of his increasing interest in brilliant colors as the main constituent in his landscapes and seascapes. His works include watercolors, oils and engravings. Turner was not only a master of landscape and seascape painting, but also a painter who approached abstraction. This is more than evident in his Thames Above Waterloo picture. This unfinished painting takes us to the heart of the smoky commercial capital which Turner usually preferred to depict from a distance. This was even when Turner was himself a Londoner by birth and resident for most of his life. Here he looks along the Thames towards Waterloo Bridge, designed by John Rennie and opened in 1817, 2 years after the Battle of Waterloo. Although donated to the United Kingdom as part of the Turner bequest in 1856, this canvas was first exhibited in 1906, when 21 of the artist's unfinished works that had been in storage at Tate were put on view. It includes indistinct representations of the arches of Waterloo Bridge in the distant center, a ship's crew at or on the right, and probably a sooty smokestack on the left. As it stands, the painting's moodiness and lack of grandeur defy the conventional approach to a scene, focused on a symbol of the nation's victory over Napoleon at the Battle of Waterloo.
The 2008 recession was one of the worst economic crises in America since the Great Depression of the 1930s. In order to end the recession, the government responded with aggressive fiscal and monetary policy. They set out with two goals: to stabilize the financial system and to restart economic growth. After Lehman Brothers collapsed, a string of other major financial institutions failed. To calm the panic, the Fed adopted a zero-rate interest policy to lower interest rates and purchased massive amounts of Treasury bonds and mortgage-backed securities. The FDIC also increased deposit insurance limits and guaranteed bank debt. On the fiscal side, Congress passed the Troubled Asset Relief Program, or TARP, and injected much-needed capital, over $700 billion, into the nation's banks. In addition, tax rebate checks were mailed to lower and middle-income households, and the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act was passed in early 2009. In total, $1 trillion, about 7% of GDP, was spent on the fiscal stimulus.
The viewpoints about the origins of first Australian peoples were once entangled with the wider debate regarding the origins of all modern humans. The broad consensus now is that all modern humans are descended from an African population of Homo sapiens that migrated around the world but bred with local archaic populations as they did so. Much of our knowledge about the earliest people in Australia comes from archaeology. The oldest human fossil remains found in Australia date to around 40,000 years ago, 20,000 years after the earliest archaeological evidence of human occupation. Nothing is known about the physical appearance of the first humans that entered the continent over 60,000 years ago. What is clear is that Aboriginal people living in Australia between 40,000 and 10,000 years ago had much larger bodies and more robust skeletons. There are a number of likely paths of migration across Asia and into Sahul. These are based on the shortest possible route and take into consideration the land bridges that would appear during times of low sea levels. However, travel may have also occurred when sea levels were high. High sea levels would have reduced the amount of usable land and increased the population pressure. During these times it may have been necessary to expand into new areas. The settlement of Australia is the first unequivocal evidence of a major sea crossing and ranks as one of the greatest achievements of early humans. However, the motive and circumstances regarding the arrival of the first Australians is a matter of conjecture. It may have been a deliberate attempt to colonize new territory, or it may have been an accident after being caught in monsoon winds.